Welcome to the ProLife Team podcast. I am Jacob Barr. I'm here with Peggy and Jor-El, and we're going to talk about the new book, The Power of Pregnancy Help, talking about the story of Heartbeat International and how it is weaved into the pro-life movement and the pro-life sphere over the last 50 years. So Peggy and Jor-El, I am so glad to have you on this podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Would you please introduce yourself as if you were talking to a group of executive directors of pregnancy clinics?
You want to go first, Jor-El?
Sure. Well, I'm Jor-El Godsey, president of Heartbeat International, and I have the privilege of being Peggy Hartshorn's successor to that role. She's been in the movement a long time, and I have not been in it as long, but also a good long time. And together, it's been a joy to work on a history of the pregnancy health movement, because that's really the history of Heartbeat as well. And so it's a privilege to be able to do a podcast with you, Jacob, also a friend for a good long time.
And I'm Peggy Hartshorn, and I got into the pro-life movement in 1973 and really began to focus primarily on pregnancy help when we started housing pregnant girls in our home in 1975. So I learned on the job what they need, who they are, how to try to get the resources for them, and the complexities of their situations and their feelings and their thoughts. And God just solidified that more and more until after about 20 years as a volunteer in the movement, I thought he was calling me to work full-time in the movement and to become the president and first paid staff person actually for Heartbeat International. And that was 1993. So I had the blessing of doing that for 23 years and also of having for the last 10 years of that, Jor-El Godsey as my right-hand person. And so he was the perfect person to take the ball and run with it when it was time for me to transition as chairman of the board, which I am now. And I still love just being involved in the work from the role of the board.
Thank you so much both for being on. I'd like to start off by sharing somewhat of an anecdote or a story about how I met you, Peggy. So my colleague and friend, Jeremy, who used to work with me, we went to the Heartbeat conference and let me back up a minute. So John Tabor, we were working with John Tabor out of Tucson, and he told us that if we would pay half, he would pay the other half to get us to the Heartbeat conference. And he made a compelling case for how important it would be for us to go. And I think it's all that to say is that he was a driving force for us to go the first time. And it really opened our eyes to the group who was Heartbeat, and to the pregnancy clinics who were working so hard with so little across the map. And so we were really energized. And I can't remember which year it was. It's probably like 2007, but he was giving a talk, and Sister Paula was in the audience. And then that's when we made the connection with Sister Paula, which then led us to being connected with her for the next, I think, 14 years or so of like working with her at ILS. But one of the favorite stories that Jeremy would often share as an icebreaker, because he also gave several workshops at Heartbeat, probably, I think one year he gave 3 workshops, very often probably 2 for several years in a row. And what his icebreaker was that when he met you in the elevator, he tripped over his suitcase as he was saying hello. And it turned out to be this really sort of funny way that he would introduce himself at a workshop, is he would explain how he met you. Like, here's Peggy Hartshorn. And then as I was trying to say hello, I trip out of the elevator through my, with luggage. And it was a really good ice-breaking story, and people would laugh and chuckle, and it just showed the reality of life and how life can be fun.
And I probably was laughing because I've done that before myself,
Yeah. And I really enjoyed this book. This book is, I feel like it more than just Heartbeat. I feel like you're capturing the history of the pro-life world, the pro-life sphere, as Heartbeat is weaved in as like a main connecting force throughout all of these players and characters and stories. And and through God working in so many different places. I feel like you're, just the magnitude, like right before the podcast started, Jor-El and I were talking, like if you actually listed out all the people who were involved and part of these stories, we'd have a phone book. We wouldn't have.
Absolutely. Yeah, right.
And I liked how you started off by sharing how God led you one step at a time towards this role. And it felt like God's fingerprints were on all sides of those doors.
Yeah.
And so,
and that was Jor-El's story too. I finally got him to tell his story at the beginning of the book. He's always so modest, but God had his hand on Jor-El all those steps as well. And we've got a picture of him in the book with his T-shirt on. What did it say, Jor-El? Something about
Rescue
Florida.
I think it is, yeah.
He at that
There was
point,
an operation. Yeah, I came through the activist side of the pro-life movement by getting arrested at Operation Rescue events, which happened a few times, and ended up in jail. In fact, that's kind of how I opened that chapter. Is the first time I heard about pregnancy centers, I was in jail, which is not where you normally would expect to hear such things, but it was because a bunch of churches, representative of churches, had been arrested and in jail, and someone says, hey, there's this thing called a pregnancy center opening near you guys. We're like, what's that? And it's like I got to be the one to go and visit that local center, and I was just captured at that point in time. It's like, well, this is cool, and very the compassionate, loving outreach that it represented was a very compelling mission.
a lot more productive. We are still involved. I mean, pregnancy help will continue to go on and will expand and strengthen. And other tactics that the pro-life movement has been called to do sometimes have a place for a certain time and place. But pregnancy help has been there since the beginning. Even before the Supreme Court decision, pregnancy help began to develop when abortion started to be promoted in various states. And so God's people stepped forth then and still are. I don't see any end to it. And maybe even it needs to even be expanded even more. And I think God will do that as states begin restricting abortions after the Dobbs decision. I really believe it'll be a major time of expansion for pregnancy help.
Yeah, because the unplanned pregnancy doesn't go away just when it becomes illegal. It essentially, that's a sin problem, and sin doesn't ever, it's there for the long road. Mm-hmm. And so there's always help there's always help needed. And so and so having pregnancy clinics prepared to help and support as the need continues on is such an amazing work to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I mean, we've even heard this from centers in states where abortion has been more restricted, that once women realize coming into the centers that, okay, the time has passed for them to be able to have an abortion in that state, sometimes, and actually a lot of times, it's a relief. And I've had women say that to me through the years. Oh, good. Now how can I have this baby, and what can you do to help? They've been pressured, urged, pushed, coerced in various ways, and made to think that abortion is the best solution for them and for the people around them, but they know that it's not deep inside. So now they can get back to, okay, how do I have this baby, and how do I do it in the best possible way? So I think that's one reason that we will have a gigantic expansion, because women know that abortion is not the best thing for their babies and for themselves. And once there's a limit, they will seek out pregnancy help.
Mm-hmm. So Peggy, I want to say thank you to you for writing this book with Jor-El, and for both of you to say thank you to you, because I feel like this was a story that needed to be told, and I think it's gonna be referenced as other stories are written down the road. Like, this is like a historical account of all of these efforts, and for the chapter devoted to Sister Paula, along with her story weaved in throughout the rest of the book, is such a beautiful thing, because she was such I could speak essentially, I felt like she was very unique when it came to her loving kindness and her ability to lead through questions.
Yes.
And for me, I felt like it also reflects, well, for essentially her Catholic beliefs were weaved in so kindly and gently with evangelical and other groups, that it really was such a bridge builder. And I feel like that also reflects sort of, I remember going to a workshop that Jor-El put on, when it comes to like some clinics are Catholic and some are evangelical, and the way that Jor-El, the way you weaved these stories together, explaining, such a bridge building experience when it comes to these different faiths and different flavors of faith, I suppose, but all having the commonality of Jesus and how we work together. And it's just a beautiful thing. And I feel like Sister Paula connected with these evangelical groups was such an amazing picture of like how Jesus is bigger than a denomination or a single group.
Yes. And I agree with you. And I was very much influenced by Sister Paul, of course. I was trained by her in the early days of AAI. And as you mentioned, the questions, yes, she was so good at helping people to think through who they are, what their feelings are by the questions she asked. And of course, that really influenced me, and it influenced the love approach that I ended up writing. How do we translate what Sister Paula could uniquely do? She was so good at that. How can we try to teach something like that, to a large group of people? And so, so the questions were so important. That's the L step of the love approach. And then opening the options in a more direct way, to a certain extent, and expressing a vision, being able to share a new vision and a new hope of what would Jesus do, more explicitly, and then the very explicit help of providing resources in the E step, extended empower. So I tried to combine what I learned from counseling, you might say, from social work in connecting to the resources, from evangelism in the V step, and as a teacher, the O step and the options. So I tried to put all that together in a way that we could really expand that way of loving and caring in providing help in a way that people could remember easily and could take with them, and could be used internationally too. But Sister Paula was a big influence in that for me.
And she was a very well-trained social work. I mean,
Right.
licensed social worker, and kind of had that skill as training. And in the early days of the pregnancy help, as it is today, the goal is to try to get someone who does not have those kind of credentials available to them. We love having social workers in the movement and who join us, whether on staff or as volunteers. But really the call in those days was to kind of empower the layman, so to speak. And
Mm-hmm.
I think what Peggy did was kind of translate some of those skills that some people will go for years. And of course, Sister Paula had a tremendous natural ability to do that as well. But she also had deep training, and so the challenge is to try to figure out a way to engage the layperson, the people that are coming with a heart. They have their own connection or history. Maybe they were themselves mothers, or had experienced an unplanned pregnancy at some point. Maybe even many people that are in our movement have had an abortion in their past. So it's getting that willing heart that has a compassion for the work, and then kind of supercharging their training in a very focused way. And that's really what the love approach did, as did other trainings in that era, was to try to get people who were suddenly motivated to help these women have a different choice besides abortion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you included a chapter and so much time for her part of the story, as I just feel that the honor was so needed to be shared, so that her story can be shared amongst the pro-life community.
And isn't it an amazing thing that, she became sick rather suddenly, and but she had the time to leave us a beautiful message, which for our 50th anniversary little video that we were able to share. And actually we were able to kind of complete her story before we published the book. So I felt that was a God thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Jor-El, when it comes to this writing of this book, what message would you want someone to be left with as they're thinking and remembering of what they read? Like, what would you want them to resonate or to hear echo in their mind?
Well, to me, it's captured in the title. It's that there is a power to pregnancy help. Those words don't often fit together in a normal conversation, but when you can kind of step back and look at the fullness of what the pregnancy help movement has accomplished, what I love to say and know to be absolutely true is that our successes cannot be undone by the next legislative bill that's signed by such and such politician. You know, our successes walk around and live and have lives, and then have families of their own and go on. I mean, we're in our 50 plus years now of pregnancy help. And that means somewhere there's someone there are probably many grandparents who otherwise might have been aborted and not have had the ability to see the lineage that they have. So that to me, I hope, is the biggest takeaway. And then looking a little closer and realize that this wasn't done because someone had a really good plan in the very beginning and lots of money and just made all this happen. This is really a bunch of people, as we talked about earlier, a lot of people involved who simply were stepping up and saying, what can I do and how can I help and how can I do this? And it's not the entire picture of the pro-life movement, but it is a picture of the pregnancy help movement, which I believe has been the backbone of the pro-life movement for decades, as things have like risen and fallen in other aspects of the pro-life movement, as the political environment has been favorable and then very unfavorable, and as it's gone through all those ups and downs, the pregnancy help movement has just been keeping on, and that's why it's been a joy to celebrate. I think it was counted in just a couple of years ago, 2 million clients served at a pregnancy center in the U.S. Those are not small numbers, and it's only because of.
And you mean 2 million in 1 year, right?
2 million in 1 year. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you for that clarification. 2 million in 1 year, and that's no small thing for centers that are often under-resourced. Certainly could always do with more, and yet they just keep on keeping on, and that's the power of pregnancy help in action.
How about you, Peggy? What was the thought that you would like people to resonate and to find as they're flipping through this book after they read through it, looking for thoughts and things to consider? What would you like to have it echo in their mind as they're considering what was written?
Well, I think I will piggyback on what Jor-El said in terms of God did this. God did this because this book is just filled with ordinary people who you would never think could do what they did and what they are doing. And we held up the book for a little while because I kept wanting more pictures. I want more pictures. I want more people in here. I want the whole list of all the people who've been on the board since the beginning of the years of Heartbeat. I want every servant leader. I want every location, every conference, because I know people will remember those things. We have so many pictures of moms and babies in here. They are real heroes, of course, with Abortion Pill Rescue. We've got hundreds and hundreds of pictures. I'm a picture person. So, to me, even if they don't read every word, just looking at the pictures of the heroes, ordinary people who have become heroes because they said yes to the Lord and he worked through them. And those that we were able to help and save in the pregnancy help movement. So I guess that's the thing I would want them to remember the most. And that's really the power, isn't it? I mean, God is really the power behind pregnancy help. and then he acts through ordinary people who bring his love to the world, whether that's the mother for her child, whether that's the volunteer in the pregnancy center for the mom and the child, whether it's the center leader and director who's loving the staff and encouraging them in their gifts. You know, it all is from the power of the Lord through us that this happens. So hopefully you can see it on the faces of the people whose pictures are in the book.
I believe that, yeah, it feels like this book is showing gratitude to the people who have essentially been servant leaders in their communities, and essentially giving, well, and that's what Heartbeat normally does every conference, is they honor the people who are working so diligently to serve Jesus through their daily lives and in serving in their communities. I believe it was last year that you honored Martha Avila with a servant leadership award, and
she became one of our legacy award
legacy.
Yeah, we've only had I don't know, Jor-El, have we had 10 maybe or 12?
It's about 10. Yes,
legacy
10
award
legacy
winners.
awards.
Yes, and yes, we were able to honor Martha for that.
So thank you so
Sister
much for
Paula,
honoring her.
Sister Paula is one of our legacy award winners as well.
Yeah, they both reflect Jesus so well. Sister Paula, I think, reflects Jesus and his ability to communicate, and I think Martha reflects Jesus. I think she reflects God's heart when it comes to her compassion for others.
Yes.
And so that's just, I just want to say thank you for honoring these people who I have seen, and I would say I can't think of anyone better to honor than those who you have picked. So your selection process is really good.
Well, and you know, the great thing for Jor-El and for me is that we actually do know and have relationships with all these people. You know, you may know some, maybe you don't know all, but that's the blessing for us to be in this full time, that we get to be with these people. Wow. Yeah.
And so I feel like in this book, I learned in this book that you were part of writing the love approach. I didn't know that until I read this. And I feel like Heartbeat staff has really championed that concept of leading with love when interacting with others. One of the stories that I shared this with Jor-El many years ago, when I was probably my first time at a Heartbeat conference, probably 2006 or 2007. And I was in a workshop, and it was being done by, I think it was Brett with Option Line. And he was very kind and loving to me as someone in the audience, not knowing that a competitor could be kind to another competitor. Like, that was foreign to me. And here he is saying kind words in that workshop to me. It just blew me away. And it really set me up to follow in his footsteps for having a desire to build a pro-life team, even amongst groups who would normally be competitors. And so I feel like your team has had an impact. Many dominoes later, it continues to provide fruit. And I can also, everyone on your team, I would say I've had positive experiences with, and I've only had experiences probably with like 10% of your team. So
well, the other 90% are just like that. I can assure you, right?
Maybe better, maybe better, because he's usually putting up with me. So I think the chances are better with the other 90% as well.
Well, yeah. So the love approach, when it comes to the love approach being part of your who you culture. Are as your culture, I believe that must be there, even though that wasn't necessarily said in the text. Like, I believe you've championed that, not just serving clients with the love approach. It sounds more like you've championed that with talking to anybody, it feels like.
Thank you. Well,
let me speak to that.
Yeah.
Let me speak to that, because Peggy drafted it, and not only did she draft it and put it on paper, but it's in her heart, and it oozes out of her at every opportunity. And that is part of the blessing that I had in joining Heartbeat International, and having the ability to receive that. I kid with my wife. I didn't naturally get mercy as a gift from God. I had to marry it, right? So, but with Peggy, I've learned and to understand more about what it means to have a love approach in everything that we do. Now, do we do it perfectly? No, but at least to have that as our foundational connection. And so Peggy's not only writing it, but living it has really sewn that into the Heartbeat culture on our team and our staff. And it's been a blessing to receive it and to learn it, and then to get the opportunity to live it as well. Hopefully even a fraction of how well Peggy lives it.
Well, thank you for that, Jor-El. That's very sweet. But, people did, I guess we did on the Heartbeat staff, and we do use it somewhat naturally. And so Betty McDowell, our vice president for affiliate services, was after me for a number of years to write a love approach training, a love approach book for everybody. We call it the Love Approach for Everybody. And it is to be used on your staff, on your board, in your home, with your spouse, with your neighbors, with your church. And so we do, if you like books, do you have the Love Approach book? We wrote it, the Love Approach for Everyone. It's called, what is it called, Jor-El? Four proven steps. Yeah. For the love approach, 4 proven steps for problem solving and relationship building in your family, church, and community. So that's something we do provide, because even our staff has recognized, wow, I guess we're learning a new way of communicating. Let's teach this to everybody. So it's a little book. It's built on stories of people who learn the love approach and then go back and use it with a spouse, or use it on the job, or, use it with someone at church, use it with a son. And so it's a story, again, stories like you mentioned in this book, the stories. People love the stories. So that's that book. You can get that from Heartbeat too. Thank you.
Yeah, and truthfully, Jacob, it comes from the reality that that woman who's at risk, in that moment of being at risk for abortion, what she needs is someone to listen to her and to understand where she's at, and then to introduce maybe more possibilities than what she's, and this is really the same path that we should practice with one another. I know Peggy really derived it from the love chapter in Scripture, 1 Corinthians 13, and that's it's applicable to all of us. That's why it's very helpful. And it's something that guides the core of our team at Heartbeat day in and day out.
One of the messages in the book that really struck me as being something that I think people need to hear more often is the best alternative to abortion is another person. Peggy, can you speak to the backstory of that line?
Well, actually, I think it came from a friend of mine in another state. Well, we're from Ohio. I think it was from a friend of mine. When he said it to me, and he was involved in pregnancy help, it just stuck with me. I mean, I never forgot it, because that actually is the essence of what we do. It's person to person, one person helping another person. Some people say it's almost like the Good Samaritan. It's like, we can stand beside, we can help lift, we can accompany, and that's what women need and families need. They need somebody to help them through those difficult times. Sometimes they only need someone to say, you can do it. I've heard so many stories from women who have come back to tell their story. One at a pregnancy center banquet, I heard. She said she got up to give her testimony. She said she heard about the banquet. This center was celebrating, I believe, their 40th year. And she just contacted them the week before and said, you won't remember me. Nobody there will remember me. But about 30 years ago, I came to your center and I only came in once. And she said, I talked my mother, my boyfriend's mother, I talked her into letting me come here before she took me to another city to get an abortion. I said, please let me go there. And she said, I didn't know what you could provide. I was only there once. But the one thing you said to me was, you can do it. You can do it and we can help you. Well, she never came back, but that gave her the courage to say, I'm not going to have an abortion. I can be a mother. I can do this. So, and then she introduced her 30-year-old son who was with her that night at the banquet. So, we don't know the impact of just being one person who when someone's in crisis, steps forward with compassion, care, and says, we can help, and gives them the affirmation, that they have the strength within themselves and the power with God's grace, to really conquer these problems that are pulling them down at that particular point in time. So it is just one person to another. On our hotline, on Option Line, Jor-El can speak to this too, that women have all kinds of ways of connecting with us electronically, but they still like to talk to another person on the phone, right, Jor-El?
That's true. Yeah. Yep. It's still happening. Even the younger generation is still interested in making phone calls. Maybe they'll chat more often and whatnot. But yeah, they'll connect. I want to add to what Peggy was saying, because I think to me that phrase, Jacob, it really kind of unpacks a couple of other concepts in a way. One of which is it's an invitation that you as a person can make a difference. It's as simple as that. And I think that is the power of what we understand from Scripture, that God is inviting us just to be willing and obedient and step out. And I think that affirmation does that. It invites people to say, well, I'm just a person. I can do this as well. Peggy was talking about the book is filled with otherwise ordinary people who have done extraordinary things. And then the other thing that I think that phrase reminds us is that, there are technologies and tools and even laws and things that will come down the pike, and we celebrate the ones that are good and whatnot. But ultimately, this is always a person-to-person reality. It's a person that gets pregnant. It's a person that feels those pressures, and those tools and technologies are wonderful. And we certainly pray for more laws and legislation to be drafted that will help us. But ultimately, it's going to be that best alternative to abortion, even when the law is already outlawing abortion. The best alternative is going to be another person helping them to realize what is really already deep within them, because God put it there.
Mm-hmm. So true.
When I think of the Good Samaritan story, many of us have been different characters in that story. We're not always the Good Samaritan role. Sometimes, the lady that you were sharing about, it sounds like she was the one who was left on the side of the road and needing medical care. And so it's amazing that someone was able to help her get medical care and pick up that cost for a bit. But sometimes I feel like the people who are in our movement or who need to be in our movement sometimes the religious leader who is busy on their way down the road with a full calendar, lots of things to do, and really just needs to slow down and, consider helping the person that they're passing by.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people in our movement, are the people who were the abuser and who left that person hurt on the side of the road and need to repent and then turn around to then be able to help the next person. And sometimes so I feel like in that Good Samaritan story, each character in there represents someone, personally, I can see how each person in there, I've been each of those people. I've been the religious person, I've been the abuser, I've been the abused, I've been all of those different people in that story. And not always the Good Samaritan, the person who we always strive to be, or, that's the right answer. But the other people are very often, part of our real world. And so I feel like the call is for people who are busy to find, to make this a priority because it's important, or for people who have hurt somebody else through, some way, to realize that they can still become the Good Samaritan and a future story.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot to pull from that.
That's so true. And one of the things I was thinking as you were talking, one group you didn't talk about were the people at the inn where the Good Samaritan dropped off the victim.
Yes.
He rescued them in the crisis, but then he dropped them off at the inn. Well, they took care of him long term. And so that could be the people in the church, that could
Yeah.
be the people in one of our maternity homes, that could be any of us, again, who a person is through the crisis, but they still need a lot of love and help and support. So factoring that in too,
Hmm.
that's beautiful what you were saying, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so going back to Option Line, it feels like Option Line is your gift to the pro-life world when it comes to having a service that expands beyond just the Heartbeat affiliates, when it comes to driving traffic to those ends, those places of help
Mhm.
and rescue.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that is just really, being open 24/7 every day of the year, providing care through phone, chat, text, in a way that helps scheduling an appointment so that people can get in front of another person, and having someone answer I think it was your words, Peggy, that you said you wanted someone to answer the phone. You didn't want a voicemail
Right.
or something like that. And I can say that is spot on and beautiful. To have another person is so much, like, I don't know what percent better, maybe 1,000% better, maybe 10,000% better than a voicemail, or a phone tree is the worst.
Yeah, right.
Imagine calling 911 and getting a phone tree.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
that's
And Jacob, not only the people that you're thinking of who maybe think they're pregnant, they've taken a pregnancy test, they don't know what to do, or their boyfriend's abandoned, they don't know what to do. I think Jor-El might speak to some of the other collaborations that we have with Option Line, because you're right, it's a gift, not just, thank you for saying that, not just to pregnancy help, but we really collaborate in Option Line with a lot of other parts of the movement. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a number of organizations that we answer their calls for them at Option Line. We don't necessarily answer it, but using their branding, but they know that they can rely on us to direct the kind of a client that is looking for the services that they have. For instance, we work with Safe Haven Alliance. So Safe Haven Alliance is a small but mighty group that is all across the country, but they couldn't on their with their ability or capability, they could not host a 24/7 365 call center. So we do that, and that way then they publish their number, we know when it comes, and someone's calling on that line, and then we know that if they're looking to place that child and find someone, that's the Safe Haven Alliance, is the ones that are kind of fulfilling the laws, which is now in all 50 states, where a woman can relinquish her child if she's maybe she's just had a baby and she's overwhelmed by it all, and feels like the only thing that she can do is place that child in the care of the authorities so that it can potentially find a better path. Then we answer those calls and direct them to those folks that are in every single state as well. They work across the country, and we serve them in that way. And then we also are able to answer the call for organizations. Maybe they are only available weekdays or in regular business hours, and then we're the ones helping take overnight calls for them. So we do that with not only the 2,200 pregnancy help organizations that are on the list itself, but for about 24 organizations that are doing some aspect of that kind of outreach of pregnancy help.
And I think your Heartbeat had honored the gentleman who started Safe Haven. I think it was about 5 years ago. The gentleman with the cowboy hat, maybe, or the cowboy boots, I forget. I was next to his booth in the workshop, in the vendor area. And I believe the lady that was with him out of Phoenix, Arizona, was actually the first baby rescued through Safe Haven. And I believe she was like 30 something. And so, that
Wow.
group's been around, and she was there, working their Safe Haven vendor booth. I don't think they're regular vendors, because that's the first time I've interacted with them. But at the same time, yeah, they've been around for that number of years, as she was the first story, there on the vendor floor, talking to people. Very, just a wonderful person.
I love how you remember so many of the powerful things at a Heartbeat conference. And you know, it's true that that Heartbeat Conference brings together an amazing group of people, and often different from year to year, not always exactly the same people, but you
Mhm.
meet these phenomenal heroes. Everyone has a wonderful story in the exhibit areas, you know, at the coffee machine, you know, in the praise and worship. I mean, it's just in the workshops. Amazing, amazing people. It's sometimes I remember talking to some people who've come for the first time, and they said it's just like, you know, drinking out of a fire hose. There's so much powerful stuff coming at them all the time, and wonderful people. But thanks for sharing all those things, Jacob.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope more people can participate in our conferences.
Yeah. I think the story of, the pregnancy clinic movement, um, if it's full of gratitude and all, as well as grief and mourning,
Mhm.
as we're mourning the loss of babies who didn't make it, but we're at the same time we have gratitude and thanks for those who were rescued. And so there
Right,
we have this, it's hard and sad, but at the same time there's joy and good things. And there's I there's a proverb that says, rejoice with those who are having joy, and then
yes,
be sad with those who are sad. That's the
right.
paraphrase version. I can't remember the exact
Uh,
words, but the idea though is I feel like the pregnancy clinic movement really encaptures that verse of, having joy with those who are celebrating life and birthdays that were almost not, you know, didn't happen. And then
mm,
also at the same time being able to mourn and feel sad and grief with those who, as many stories are sad. And
yes.
and so I feel like our movement is full of both sides or both parts of, gratitude and grief at the same time.
Mhm, mhm.
Which is why it's very difficult to understand why anyone would have anything against the pregnancy help movement. But we have our detractors. Largely they arise. We did a whole chapter on this about defending against attack, and I just don't understand it at its core, except that it's ideologically driven. Sometimes it's the people that have been hurt
Mhm.
by the abortion industry that can't find themselves to see it beyond it or above it. So they're motivated with that. But frankly, there's a political machine that's out there, and even now, Jacob, that they're going after things like the abortion pill reversal. They're targeting pregnancy centers. There's some very unfortunate uh, articles out there that are published by otherwise well-respected people in the medical community that turn out that they have connections with the abortion industry, for instance, and they're writing unkind things about the pregnancy help centers in particular. So it's very challenging to watch that and watch how kind of on the political spectrum, some people will find pregnancy centers in particular to be very soft targets because they're stationary and they're warm and kind people, and they really don't want to be um, they don't want to be a big voice in the community. They just want to be a helping hand. And so they end up being soft targets and easy targets for those that are trying to do negative things against us.
Hmm. Yeah, the attacks. Well, speaking of APR, like that's an ongoing attack, and it feels like, resolution is still pending on that being turned around, and there's a lot of
Yeah, that
prayer
chapter is
needed.
still being written. That chapter is still being written right now because it's a huge thing. Abortion pill reversal it's almost, I think it's God's answer to the rise of chemical abortion,
Yeah.
which we could see a little bit, but really didn't know fully how much it was going to be a factor in our future. And right now, on the verge of Dobbs being announced, we already know that the administration that's in power now has relaxed some of the rules so that chemical abortion can be delivered by mail more readily. So we know that that's increasing. We saw Guttmacher's own numbers were announced after our book was written, but announced just recently that they're saying in 2020, we had estimated that the percentage of chemical abortions for all abortions was going to be around 50%, but in
Yeah.
fact it's not, it's 54%. So, and that's a preliminary number they're saying. I think that they might even adjust that up higher. And if you then extend out the trajectory that suggests that in 2023 the number could be as high as 70%. So we know that chemical abortion is increasing. It's already driving the abortion numbers back up after they had basically declined to 50% of what they were in 1991. So now we're seeing some unfortunate changes, and it's going to be all the more important. And and the reality about abortion pill reversal, while it's not preferable to a woman having never taken the chemical abortion, it ought to be something that should be her right to choose, and should be her ability to attempt to rescue that baby, and she should not be held to having to fulfill an abortion she no longer consents to. And yet the argument from the other side is to make her, almost force her, either out of ignorance or some of the doctors that if she's taken the abortion pill and then regretted it and then has reached out back to the abortionist, they said, oh no, you have to complete this. And that's just unfortunate and unconscionable.
Yeah, and I feel like whether the one, I think the number is 60-ish% of those who go through the APR regimen will, the baby will survive with no added birth defects. Yes. Based on whether it's taken, through the muscles or orally, like that's the percent difference. But then when it comes to the woman who does, the baby doesn't survive, I feel like she's doing something. So even for her, it's better to try than to not try. And for the woman who does try and has, the baby survives, obviously there is blessing and good things from life. But for the woman who where the baby doesn't survive, I feel like she'll have a, she can at least say that she tried, even though it didn't turn out in a positive way.
I had that very experience with a nurse who was actually a nurse on the hotline, and on the APR hotline when we first were encountering it. And she stopped. We were talking about, I said, I was like, it's unfortunately it's only 64% effective or something like that. And she stopped me. She said, Jor-El, don't you dismiss what you give her in the ability to try to reverse something that she had done herself. So it's really allowing her, in a sense, to redeem the action, even though it's ultimately unsuccessful. It gives her that as something that she can carry, that I at least made the effort to reverse something that I had unfortunately stepped into to begin with. So I think you're right, Jacob. I think that is something that should not be minimized and should be also clearly a part of it. We wish, of course, the successes were higher, and maybe if we could actually get the medical community on our side and to help begin researching this more clearly and more specifically, then we might see that percentage even improve. But unfortunately, we have some research that has been attempted to get clearances from various entities like internal review boards, and even the FDA has kind of slow walked some things and not provided full agreement or sign off so that we could conduct that research. And again, those things can't be anything less but politically motivated.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
The first place that I heard about APR was at Sister Paula's International Life Services Advanced Training Institute, and I remember seeing Nurse Debbie at the booth, and I think the next year they had Dr. George Delgado. But I remember talking to her, and I just I had no clue as to what she was really saying. Like, it did not make sense. Like, you can reverse an abortion. I really I'm not tracking. It took me like 6 months after that training institute to it finally, a bell or a light bulb went off, and I'm like, oh, I finally get it. And so I called her and I said, hey, I want to help you with your website. And so we ended up, offering some donation services, and we worked with them for, I think it was about, I want to say 5 years before Heartbeat really, took the baton and, with your team of amazing team to, taking it to the next level. But yeah, it was, what an amazing group. I mean, Dr. George Delgado, Nurse Debbie, and several nurses who were willing to take the call for their hotline, working through Culture of Life Family Services. And just what an amazing group there out of San Diego to start that network, and then to be able to hand it off to Heartbeat to take it to, a larger audience.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of those historical moments in my mind. Standing, we're in California that year with our conference, as only God could have planned, because we're just not that bright to know what we're going to be doing 3 and 4 years ahead. These major changes that he's gonna orchestrate. So it was a real blessing to be in California that year and to kind of take the keys to the car, so to speak, and actually began answering the calls on option line at that very same time. But we learned a lot, and the team that was Abortion Pill Reversal Network at that time, it was a small but mighty team of all volunteers. I mean, mostly, and we've been able to now we have more than 40 nurses that are a part of that. We have about half dozen that are full-time with Heartbeat, who are empowered to. That we have multiple like nurse managers that take weeks at a time of being shift managers. So we've been able to grow that because it needs to be grown, and it needs to be bigger because the numbers are getting bigger. If we're now talking 350,000, 400,000 chemical abortions, we know that there are many that are experiencing that regret. And unfortunately, we've had some other kind of unsavory actions towards abortion pill reversal. Big tech has joined in on this. Google began censoring ads for abortion pill reversal back in September of 2021, and to this date have still not kind of released that. So we know that that's affecting our call volume significantly. It dropped by more than 2/3, as much as 3/4 when they enacted that. The good news is that women are still finding help, and it's taking them a longer route, but women are still able to find help. They can still reach our website. They can still find us maybe through some other marketing opportunities, but there are abortion pill reversals happening every single day at Heartbeat. We've seen continue to see women seek that help, and most of them, I think, most of them, 75% of them are contacting us inside that first 24 hours. We only have 72 hours for the effectiveness. Otherwise, it drops. The effect of the abortion pill is too strong by that time. And so, but if we can get to her quickly, and that's the good news, is that whatever it is that's causing her heart and mind to shift, just to say, I no longer want this abortion, it's happening quickly, and we're able to get her to that help very quickly, in only a matter of hours in most cases.
And maybe it would be good if you have anybody listening who is wondering, how does this happen, like you did, but that the abortion pill is really a 2-pill regimen, and the first pill cuts off the progesterone. It's an anti-progesterone. Before the second pill, then the woman takes it home, generally causes contractions to start. All right. So if we can start progesterone treatment in the first day or so and reverse the effect of that first pill, then the baby can be saved. And so progesterone, as most women know, is a very healthy, wonderful hormone that's been also used to stop miscarriages ever since the 1950s. So why the medical profession would call this junk science is just ridiculous.
And they even try to say progesterone is bad for her, but she makes progesterone herself. Like that.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense.
When you're pregnant, you have more and more progesterone. All right. So it's a very healthy hormone for pregnant women. So but isn't it sad today, Jacob, that it's so hard to get the truth out there? Things that should be so self-evident, things that are commonsensical. People will just say the opposite, and a lot of people don't bother to really think it through. So there's a lot of ignorance, and people who sometimes it's not just ignorance, it's people just don't really want to know. They don't really want to know the facts. So it's very hard for us to get the truth out. So thank you for your program that helps to do that.
Yeah, and with with Dr. George Delgado discovering this, and then I forget the name of the previous doctor 2 years earlier having
Dr.
that
Harrison.
Dr. Harrison having that same response to someone saying, "How can I reverse this?" So having two doctors independently coming up with, a way to reverse, just as it's essentially, I think it boils down to spiritual attack, and this is a battle over life, and it's a spiritual battlefield.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's not that that's simple or anything, but I feel like maybe that explains why there is opposition, or explains why people wouldn't, be a fan of something just so obviously a good and healthy idea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only reason why I can explain why someone wouldn't be a fan of this would be it's spiritual warfare, and they're opposing on the opposing team. Perhaps, I'm not sure.
Well, the idea that once God moves you, once you are open to the truth, the scales fall from your eyes. I love that image. The scales fall. So some people have those scales. They're looking right at the truth, but they don't see it. Prayer, of course, is our main weapon, if you want to call it that, in the battle that we're in. And that has always been a big part of Heartbeat. Another wonderful chapter is about how we try to make Christ the center of everything. You should notice that, I'm sure, at our conferences too, Jacob, right?
Yes, and there's been a lot of benefits from that being weaved in. I remember Anne with NIFLA. What's her last name? Anne O'Connor.
Anne O'Connor, I'm sorry, yes.
Yes. And how I remember her having that, essentially, sharing that clinics, pregnancy clinics need to go medical, as she has probably given that talk probably a dozen times at Heartbeat conferences, talking about making your clinic, having that religious language weaved into the bylaws, into your founding document, so that you have religious freedom in hiring people based on belief, in order to have that religious freedom of hiring someone who believes certain things that are good.
Thank goodness we live in a country where we still have freedom of religion, and it's been being upheld, but we have to pray that that continues, because we're one of the few countries in the world where that's possible. Jor-El mentioned some of the attacks on abortion pill rescue, and in Ireland and England, apparently, Jor-El, as I understand, the National Health Service will not recognize any conscience rights of any doctors who want to perform abortion pill rescue. They just won't let them do it. If you're asked, you can't do it. Otherwise, you lose your job. So there is no freedom of religion in the way that they practice medicine. And so we have to be very thankful that we still have that in this country, but it's under attack as well.
I also like the case that you made in the book about how we have, I think you said 3,000 clinics and pregnancy clinics in the US. And I think you said there's about 2,000 and something across the globe outside of the US, and how 98% of the funds are spent on these 2%, and 2% of the funds are spent on the clinics outside of the US, when it comes to the need outside of the US. Can you speak to that, Jor-El?
Yeah. Actually, so that was a broader statement that I borrowed from others. It wasn't necessarily pregnancy help center specific. It was more about the pro-life funds that are raised and the amount of the problem. It was if you just look at just easy round numbers, imagine we have about 1 million abortions a year in the US, but globally there are 50 million, right? So that means we only have 2% of the global number of abortions. But when you look at funding if we just lump all of the pro-life groups together, and then what we know of the pro-life groups that outside and their funding, then we get that 98% of the funding for pro-life causes is directed at the U.S., which is 98% of the funding is directed at 2% of the abortion problem. So it shows that there's a lot of work that can be done outside the U.S. We need to do all that we're doing, but we need to do more internationally. And there's a lot of opportunity to work in that area. And there are our friends. We have friends all over the globe now in 84 countries where they are desperate to do more for their own community, for their own people. But they lack what we have here in the U.S., which is maybe an especially stable and charitable economy, for instance. There are lots of countries that are still developing countries and don't have the economic power and strength that we do, or do they have the kind of charitable history that has been a blessing of the United States in particular. And so that, which is in our law, we're very familiar with this idea of tax deductible, benefits from the IRS, and I don't think that lives in that same way and to that same degree in other parts of the world. So there's much to do. There's a lot of opportunity. There's more to do here in the U.S., and we've already talked about that on a previous podcast. But there's also more to be done internationally, and that's why it's a pleasure and a privilege to be part of Heartbeat International, which is really working to unify and advance the pregnancy help community worldwide.
In the book, you had mentioned there's a mention of work being done in Ukraine, and I believe this was written probably months before the war in Ukraine was taking place. That seems like that's it just seems like there was a lot being done there, and now I feel how do you reflect on the work being done in Ukraine at this time? How does that sound to you or look to you?
Well, it's very difficult. We've been keeping track of that as best we can. We know most of our friends have escaped harm at this point. Those that we were in connection with have had to leave the country, and we know that some of them have been able to turn around and help moms and children that were or pregnant moms that had to leave the country for fear of being in harm's way, but still had need. And now if their pregnancy was a crisis before, it's certainly a crisis in being displaced. So we're seeing that happening. There is some recent affiliates of Heartbeat have multiple locations in the Ukraine and then one location in Poland. Well, the one location in Poland is now being like the hub of help for those that are leaving the Ukraine, and because of the connections there, it's been a very positive opportunity to help them, and so we've been able to do that. And yet, what we also know, because the other thing that I think for me anyway, the writing the book, it helps me to have a longer view of things. And so what we can see that will come about at some point, that the fighting will end. We pray it sooner rather than later. We pray that cooler heads prevail, and that the Ukrainians will be allowed to have their own home and their own country, and continue to be the community that they desire to be, which means that they'll have future pregnancies and future things that they'll do. So we hope that there will be an opportunity to rebuild and to restore what certainly has been hopefully only temporarily disrupted, but pregnancy help will be necessary once the active fighting is over and the rebuilding begins.
Well, and I like the tagline of the book underneath the power of pregnancy help. It says the first 50 years. And so I feel like that speaks to the need for this to continue on for decades, or until Jesus comes back, as this is a ongoing effort. And as the international need is great, there's hopefully the call, I guess, is for more people to join the work, more people to join the teams, and to start new pregnancy clinics in countries that are, that have only a few or none, and to start more pregnancy clinics in highly populated cities that are outnumbered. There's this where there's great need, perhaps.
Right. Yeah.
That's what we have seen have happened in the U.S. and that needs to happen at that same pace and rate. We have about, I did a study, we have about 4 pregnancy help centers per every 500,000 people in the US. So 4.3. The next closest country to us is Italy, which has just over 1. And then after that, it's Zambia, and then everything else drops off from there. And so there's a lot of room for opportunity, and they need the same kind of energy and effort applied in those other countries. Those babies are just as important as American babies, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help them to do that. It's difficult because it requires a lot of support. It requires a lot of people. It requires really their own country to rise up and do that. And that's happening. It's just not happening anywhere near as fast as we would want it to. But we are grateful for those champions that really stand against, buck their own culture and stand for life in the midst of some very challenging environments.
And let me say, though, I think one of the wonderful things that Heartbeat does, and we've been doing it for probably 30 years, if not more, bringing some of these international leaders every year on scholarship to the Heartbeat Conference and letting them make friends with other pregnancy centers that will then help support and pray for them, and to give them the training and the encouragement and the mentorship they need, to really keep going in their countries and do the maximum that they can. And believe me, they are so inspired by America. I mean, sometimes we get down on our country, we get aggravated at the type of laws that we have. We get frustrated that it's taken so long to reverse Roe v. Wade. But these countries, many of them just derive a lot of hope from seeing what we're doing in the United States, and from knowing that there is a country in the world where abortion is still alive as a controversial issue, where Christians are standing up and really fighting against it, and where we have the opportunity, to turn back the clock on abortion. And so that's so inspirational to them. So I think even though it does seem unfair that we're spending so many pro-life dollars here in the US versus overseas, what we are doing and what we've accomplished here over the first 50 years with God's help and guidance is a light to the rest of the world. It does inspire them, that it is possible to stand for life, to have a strong Christian voice, to make an impact on the laws in your country. And even if you're not making an impact in the laws, to change the culture one person at a time, through, like you say, providing God's love in the pregnancy centers. And they are really encouraged by what God's doing here. So we're happy to share with them as much as we can.
Yeah. So it feels like Heartbeat is exporting the creativity and wisdom of this pro-life group here in the U.S., bringing these ideas to other communities outside of the U.S. And one of the Alliance for Life in Missouri, I believe Marsha Middleton, who I've seen many times at the Heartbeat conferences, over the last 4, 5 or so years, they've had a fundraiser every year for, I believe it was Zimbabwe, and I think it was Sean Dickerson who jumped in a freezing cold pool for part of this fundraiser at the last conference. But anyways, all that to say is, essentially, if they would raise this amount of money, he had to jump in the pool, and there was a really good, raising of money.
That's great.
But I'm pretty sure that all started at a Heartbeat conference, because I don't think Alliance for Life Missouri would have made that connection. I mean, I can't really imagine them making that connection anywhere but at a Heartbeat conference, as you are inviting the international leaders and international people to your conference, and then that allows for people like Marsha Middleton to strike up a relationship, and then that's been able to continue for the last 4 to 5 plus years, with fundraising happening every year. And I pitched in. I wanted to see Sean jump in the pool.
Good. And see, only in America would we raise money that way. The internationals saw that. If they sent a video over there, they'd say, "Oh my goodness, those crazy Americans," but they might try it. They might try it the next time themselves.
There's actually several of those stories that are like that are some of them are many years along, where the center, not so much the fundraiser part, but just saw it as an extension of themselves. Some of the pregnancy help organizations in the U.S. will tithe some portion of their fundraising, with the idea of sowing into these countries and these communities that are in great need. And so it's really fun to be a part of that and to know of those relationships. In some cases, they've actually traveled to be in those countries, taken a team. I know some that have gone to Africa, others that have gone to Europe, and having a chance to meet. Not only will they host them when they come to the U.S. Or visit with them when they're at Heartbeat Conference, but some have been able to even travel and treat it like a missions trip and bless them in their country as well. So it is fun, Jacob, to see those relationships. I can see them forming, and then it's fun then, years later to realize, like, oh wow, this is going on, and this has been going on since that moment.
Yeah.
That's our own experience. One of our very special long-term relationships is with Edward and Barbara Mwansa from Zambia, and that all came about from their very first conference was 1998, and from that they decided to open a pregnancy center, which they did. And then they decided that it wasn't enough to have one, there should be others. And now, after serving in that for more than 30 years, they have a network of pregnancy center affiliates all across Central and Southern Africa, about 180 different pregnancy centers and outreaches. They formed an organization called the Association for Life of Africa, and are working very diligently to continue to spread the word across Africa. So you never know what can happen at a Heartbeat Conference, and how that kind of God moment can occur there. It can occur anywhere, because I believe this is part of God's heart, and He wants to do it. He wants to see it done everywhere in the world.
So I know that we probably have had about an hour of talking, so I probably should wrap things up. Before I do, I want to just point out for anyone who's listening, when you get the chance to go to a Heartbeat Conference, at the beginning of the conference, there's probably going to be a time for the internationals to share. And I would really encourage you to make sure that you attend that international, where you get to hear reports from different people from across the globe, share stories of, what's going on in their country and in their area, as you will find that, these stories are amazing and well worth hearing and pondering, and being aware of these stories will give you the chance possibly to pray, possibly to get involved, or to at least be encouraged, as there are so many amazing stories across the globe, as these people are working in much harder circumstances than in the US, and very often where they are outnumbered. They are but God is at work, and they share stories. And so anyways, I just think that international time, when you provide that space for people to share, is just been remarkable and just very encouraging.
Thank you for that.
Well, we always have a Parade of Nations where we get to celebrate the nations and their work, and they also, several of them bring items that we would find interesting as Americans. They'll bring some of their things that are crafts from their own country, and we have those in the exhibit hall as well. So it's always fun to get to visit with them and understand the type of mission that they're doing in their area, and to celebrate them, and to just be blessed by how God is moving in their hearts as He does in ours.
Well, thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Jor-El, for being on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been fun talking.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that'll be a wrap. And thank you so much. I think this was really good. And it's just exciting to see hear all the stories. Yeah, I feel like the number of people in the book represent just like this, the tip of the iceberg when it comes to all the stories that are available. And it's so good to, for people to sort of just see that God has got a bazillion fingerprints in this movement.
I love the way you You really have grasped the book. I mean, it's wonderful, Jacob. I just hope we've got other readers out there who got as much out of it as you do. Of course, partly that was because you've also experienced the conference. You know that this is true, and you know that you're just getting little bits of what you've experienced there. So
Yeah,
thanks for help spreading the
yeah,
word.
like when you mentioned, like there's like this list of names, and like when I just see like John Tabor's name, like there could be a
Yeah.
book about John Tabor or John Enzor or
It's
or
true.
Kirk Walden. I mean, there's just like there's so much there with so
Yeah.
many people who are just complete servant leaders when it comes to how they interact with people and their gifting for being encouragement and influencing others in a positive way. It's huge.
Yeah, it is. Well, thank you so
Amen.
much.
Thank you.
We-
Have a
Thank you,
wonderful.
Jacob.
Thank
will
you.
we see
Appreciate
will
it.
we see you at the conference this year?
Yes, I'll be there solo.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yes, I'll be
all
there.
right.
Thank you. Bye,
Thanks,
Jor-El.
See you
Bye,
then.
Peggy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers,